Hey, welcome to Next Level Method Podcast. I'm Richard Ryerson.
And I'm Matt Lilly.
And we're here to help you take your life to the next level. Let's get started. Dan Buettner on the show. I really enjoyed talking with him. He is the author of The Blue Zones.
Yep.
9 Lessons for Living Longer. Finding Happiness in the Blue Zones Way, The Blue Zone Solution, Eating and Living like the World's Healthiest People. And he's got a new book coming out called The Blue Zone Challenge. He'll explain what blue zones are. I didn't know what they were prior to meeting Dan.
Right.
But you came across them
probably a decade ago.
Yeah, that's you kind of modeled.
First came out. Yeah.
So basically, the blue zone are basically places on the planet where people tend to live longer and healthier lives. And so it's very fascinating stuff, and the research, 20 years worth, and we kind of dive into some of those.
Yeah.
But anyway, you modeled your
fitness facility.
Fitness facility. Kind of his philosophy.
And almost any business I'm involved in, I really think about the things that he put in there. That the research. When I say, he didn't create this stuff, he researched it and found. He basically, as he said, he kind of reverse engineered. They went out and found places that people were living the longest, the happiest, the healthiest, and then they said, okay, what are these people doing? Let's study that. And so, a lot of it comes down to, as you'll hear in the podcast, and certainly if you go to his website or the books, but a lot of it's community. It is your diet. It's community, diet, sense of purpose, how active you are as a human being. And so it's kind of, to some degree, it's kind of common sense. It's just nice to see it all kind of put together and say, oh, okay, this actually is a real thing. It's not just hypothetical.
Yeah, and it's not oh, this is a new diet or a new thing. And basically, he's like, no, all we're trying to do is change your surroundings so that the healthy choice becomes the default choice.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I loved how he put that.
Yeah.
Great conversation. Any other takeaways?
I think we give a ton of resources. So it's not only his book that's coming out, the Blue Zone Challenge, but the website and we reference a lot of different things that you can look into. People can look into as resources and really say, okay, what can I do? Simple things that I can do either at my house or in my friendships or my relationships or whatever that is to kind of, to me, it's not about living long. It's about being happy.
Having a quality life.
And he said basically those two things live together, right? Happiness and longevity kind of coexist together. And so I think that's what we hear in this podcast. And I think people really come away with some good resources and some good information and be inspired, hopefully.
Yeah, I think you're really going to enjoy this one. And if you stick around the end, you follow him on Instagram. He graciously said, if you have specific questions as you listen to this podcast, he's more than happy to
reach out and answer them.
And he'll answer them directly. So great guest, gracious guest, giving guest. I really enjoyed this conversation.
I did as well.
All right, go check us out at nextlevelmethod.com to learn more about what we got coming up. And we appreciate the support you're giving us as we try to grow this podcast. Follow us on your favorite podcast application, and if you're so inclined, give us a 5-star rating and review. That would mean the world to us. Again, check out nextlevelmethod.com, and let's get on with this great conversation with Dan Buettner here on Next Level Method. Well, Dan, so excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
It's great to be here.
Well, I just had a birthday, 2 weeks ago. I turned 53. So the good news is, according to Dan, I still got another 47 years to go.
You're easily.
I'm excited about learning how to live longevity. Something you said that really resonated with me, or at least I'd never even thought about this, is when we're talking about life, there were two different things, and I'm going to screw this up here, but there's longevity, but our bodies are capable from a physiological standpoint to live to 90 years, but on average, we're only making it to, there's about 12 years that we're leaving on the table, basically, due to lifestyle. Right. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, so the maximum average life expectancy for humans is about 92 or 93. So that means if given an average set of genes, if you do everything right, you should be able to hit almost mid-90s. But life expectancy in America is about 80. So we're leaving probably more than a dozen good years on the table.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the people making it to their mid-90s, as a rule, the longer you live, the healthier you've been. So people living a long time are a healthier cohort than the cohorts that are dying at 60, who typically have 7 or 8 bad years leading up to their death. Whereas, a centenarian in Blue Zone, they might have 6 bad months and then, go to bed one night and not wake up the next day.
And so for people, so I want to make sure that for our listeners and viewers, so just a high level snapshot, you're known for really this thing called the blue zones. For people who have never heard of a blue zone, what is a blue zone and why is that important?
Working for National Geographic, I led a project to, in a sense, reverse engineer longevity. And instead of looking for it in a petri dish or a test tube, we hired demographers to parse through worldwide census data to identify pockets where entire populations are living longest. They either have the highest concentration of centenarians or the highest life expectancy at middle age. And then because these are people who've achieved the outcomes we want, which is live a long time, largely without diabetes and heart disease and cancer and dementia, then we deploy other standardized methodology to identify what they're doing and what are the common denominators. And we found 5 of these blue zones. We found the longest lived women in Okinawa, the longest lived men in the highlands of Sardinia. On the island of Ikaria, Greece, a population of 10,000 people who live 8 years longer than Americans, almost completely without dementia.
Wow.
In the Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica, a population that spends 1/15 the amount we do on healthcare, and they have about a 3-fold better chance of reaching that healthy age 92 than we do in America. And then among the Seventh-day Adventists, principally in Loma Linda, California, we found the longest lived Americans. And these conservative Christians, Methodists, are living about 7 to 9 years longer than Americans are living.
That's amazing. I want to get into some of those characteristics that you found on that. But also, I think it might be helpful, too, is like, what are the couple of myths? Like, there's a few myths out there about aging and longevity. What are some of those? Because I think that might help as we dive into this.
Well, the first one is if your parents died young, that you have to die young. Only about 20% of how long you live is dictated by your genes. So really, how long you're going to live is really up to you, more so than it is, what parents you ended up with. Living to 100, people think if they try really hard, they can live to 100, but really, you have to have won the genetic lottery to win to only about 1 in 2,500 Americans reach age 100. So you not only, for the most part, need to have a really great lifestyle, but you also have to have you have to have genes. Again, 93, 94, yes, but 100 not. So, and then this idea that humans can live to 150 or 200 right now is, in my mind, fantasy. The longest lived human ever was a French woman named Marie Calmet, who made it to 122 years and 4 months. And she's a real outlier. So there's nothing on the scientific horizon. There's no pill, there's no supplement, there's no hormone or genetic intervention that has shown any scientific efficacy for reversing, stopping, or even slowing aging. Aging marches on at a fairly predictable pace, doubling every 7 years. The rate at which we age doubles about every 7 years. So the bad news is not only as we get older faster.
Yeah, it's logarithmic, right?
Yeah, you're, at 53-year-old, you're probably aging at a rate of about 64 times faster than a 12-year-old. So that's the bad news.
This doesn't sound so good for you now.
Yeah, I know,
all of a sudden,
right?
It went from okay to
40 years. And the other thing is, another myth is that as I get older, life is going to suck. And the reality is, happiness is a U-shaped curve. And we tend to start out really happy in our 20s and optimistic. And through our 30s and 40s, we're often disappointed. We get older, we often lose our health. The toughest years are usually between the ages of 45 and 55 when it comes to overall happiness. But then something interesting happens. Happiness starts to creep up again as we get older and wiser. And as long as we keep our health, the happiest cohort are 90 and 100-year-olds. They're actually happier than the 20-year-olds as long as they keep their health. So you actually have a lot to look forward to if you set up your life the right way.
I'm almost out of that. I got 2 more years, so I'm out of 55,
Yeah.
and I'm really going to start getting happy.
and I'm in the middle, so I was like, oh gosh, another 5 years, really?
So what I really appreciated about the Blue Zone in Italy. So is it Sardinia?
Sardinia?
Sardinia is the kind of the culture of how they view the elderly, whereas here in the States, it's kind of like once you get past 25, it's all downhill. But there, it's like they're revered, right? You go into a bar in Sardinia, I think as you put it, you don't have the Sports Illustrated calendar up there. You've got the Centenarian of the Month, hanging up in the bar there, right? So I think, but that about how, from a cultural standpoint, that really was fascinating to me. It makes sense, but how like the family can have a huge impact on the whole aging process.
Yeah. So just we'll unpack that for just a second. So, as you correctly point out, we tend to celebrate youth. The most dangerous year of our lives in America, on average, is the year we retire.
Yeah.
There's a shocking spike in mortality the year you retire. In blue zones, first of all, many of them don't even have the word for retirement. There's no artificial punctuation between your productive life and your life of repose. But you're also not warehoused in retirement home. If you want to see your parents' life expectancy drop by about 4 years overnight, put them in a retirement home. And that's the case most of the time. In Sardinia, in the blue zone, it would shame the family to put the aging parent in a retirement home. Instead, they stay with the home. They help the cooking. They manage the garden. They help raise children. They have the wisdom and the resiliency to get through tough economic times. They've seen the agricultural ups and downs, and they can advise on when to plant and how to deal with drought and so forth. There's just so much wisdom that is harnessed that favors the younger generation. But it turns out that when older people are kept engaged, they're more likely to take their medicines, and they move more, and they keep their mind sharper, and there may be a psychosomatic element to it. But it's this virtuous circle that keeping aging parents nearby not only benefits them, it actually trickles down to the grandchildren. In homes with the grandparent in them, they benefit from what's called the grandmother effect, where grandma's at home, kid has lower rates of mortality, lower rates of disease, and they do better in school.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I really like that. I mean, it makes sense. And I even think back, I was thinking of a conversation that my dad had. They had grandparents that lived with them for the better part of his childhood, even to when he was a teen. I think even to when he left for the Navy when he was 18. And just the way he talked about that relationship and having those family members in the house, and how much he learned from them, how much they were there. I mean, he always talked about it in that sense.
Well, and from Dan, what you just said, basically the happy people in the house are actually the kids and the elderly.
Yeah,
right?
The parents who are
and
like,
the parents are the ones that are miserable in this situation. But so the kids probably do relate to the grandparents more because they're in that space of both being more joyful. It's like a good combo for them.
Yeah, it's especially the second child. Mom has a baby, all the attention goes to that baby. The second baby comes along, and the first baby tends to get neglected. So actually it's the first baby that grandma really helps raise. It makes a big difference, but especially and if more babies come along, boy, in this world today where there's a chronic shortage of good child care, grandmas are some of the best, and we lose that opportunity when we send our aging parents to retirement homes.
I think there's a whole business model there. I'm actually in the senior care business, so I totally understand what you're saying and the statistics on that. But I think there's a whole business model there of like rent a grandma. Right, basically instead of right. I mean, so basically the family pays to have grandma live with them. I like this. I like this model.
I
Right.
like it too.
How much as you went into this project when you first started? I mean, I think intuitively, I think we would all say, "Oh yeah, diet has something to do with this," and I'm sure some of the, I mean, that did bear some fruit. Any surprises though, aside from diet and even what we just talked about here with kind of the culture aspect of family? Anything else kind of that surprised you?
Yeah, there's a number. First of all, there's no superfood.
Hmm.
I actually went thinking I'd find a superfood, and there's no superfood. Secondly, the healthiest foods on the planet are peasant foods. They're the cheap stuff that you can get in just about any grocery store.
Interesting.
Uh, Grains, rice, corn, um, oats, um, beans. If people eat a cup of beans a day, live about 4 years longer than people who don't eat beans.
Hmm.
A handful of nuts um, that not only taste delicious, but we know that nut eaters live about 2 years longer than non-nut eaters. And that this whole kind of misconception that I can't afford to eat healthy because I can't go to a fancy grocery store and buy all the fresh organic produce is just wrong. I mean, yeah, of course, if you could afford it, it's great, but even the poorest Americans could afford to eat a blue zone diet and live a long time. Yeah, you give me rice and beans and a few spices, and I'll make you one of the healthiest, high protein meals you can imagine that tastes delicious and doesn't have the saturated fat and the hormones and pesticides and all the other things we're worried about.
Hmm.
Yeah, this is kind of a geeky technical thing, but does the rice have to be? Is it different if it's
Mm.
brown or white? Is it better?
Brown's better. Brown
Brown.
rice
Yeah.
is going to be better. I know there's some arsenic concerns, but I wouldn't worry about it. Soak the rice, cook it. I make a big. In fact, I make a big batch of rice and eat some of it, and then I freeze the rest, so I don't have to cook it over and over again.
I remember seeing a story about Sardinia on the wine piece of it. I
Right.
mean, is there something special about their wine in Sardinia that's different than other wines?
Yes, it's Grenache grape. They call it Canenau. Uh, Partly because it is grown at high altitudes with brutal sun, it creates this very red skin.
Mm.
And then they macerate the wine in the seeds and the skins. So actually, the pigment is where most of the resveratrol and the really powerful antioxidants that protect the arteries, the lining of the arteries, that's actually in the pigment. So often the redder the wine, the healthier the wine. And in Sardinia, the Blue Zones wine, and you can Google Blue Zones wine.
Yeah, that was getting ready. I was getting ready to ask. I was like, okay, what brand
know,
is
that's what I
that
was gonna
actually?
say. Yeah.
Yeah, Blue Zones wine. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you can buy it. That actually has the highest levels of known polyphenols in the world. And in Sardinia, this wine is consumed in small amounts throughout the day.
Huh.
So it's just
seen
like little sips throughout the day.
Yeah, there'll be a 2 ounce glass with lunch, maybe 4 ounces at sort of happy hour with friends in the village, and then another couple ounces with the nighttime meal. And we know that drinking a little bit of wine with a Blue Zone diet, which is say vegetable, mostly whole plant-based food, actually quadruples the antioxidants absorption. So there's actually an argument that having a small glass of wine with meal could be healthier for you than a glass of water.
Wow. Now that's amazing to me. I mean, that's and I remember, I think from the book though, you said overall, if I think in the book, isn't it that other than the 7-day Adventists, that if you drink a little bit, you live statistically longer than if you don't drink at all, or obviously if you overdrink. Was that part of your?
That's right. Yeah, people are women 1 drink a day, men 2 drink a day, have lower rates of overall mortality. Now, like everything else, people can go out to the internet and they can find studies that say, well, wine drinkers have higher rates of breast cancer, but they also have lower rates of cardiovascular disease. I just know that in Blue Zones, people drink moderately, sometimes they drink a lot, but they also live the longest. So I'm just saying that alcohol consumption is not incompatible with living a long, healthy, and happy life. And for those people who enjoy a drink every now and again, um, from what I observed in blue zones, it's probably not a bad idea.
Well, and I think the point you also made was there's a high social component to that, right? It's not just that I'm drinking the wine like a vitamin to make
Right.
to live healthier. That's not it at all. There's joy
There's a
in the
social
drinking,
aspect
but
there.
then there's the social aspect of to your point, kind of the happy hour at the local watering hole there, or whatever they call them there, but pub or whatever that is. But it's not just that I'm not doing it for health. I'm doing it because I'm enjoying it, and because it's a social function. Is that
Correct.
okay?
Yeah. And yeah, you don't see people slamming
Right.
uh, 8 ounces of wine at the end of work by themselves. It's a social beverage or a beverage to accompany a meal.
And are the meals longer? I would assume that the meals are way more extended. I mean, it's ridiculous what we do here, 15, 10-minute meals and lunches. They're probably drawn out, right? In the blue zones. Is that something that's
The midday meal tends to be the big meal, and you tend to sit down with your family at the midday meal.
Hmm.
I don't know if breakfasts are any slower there than they are here. But it's often the case that a meal will begin with some uh, words of gratitude
Hmm.
or some punctuation between their everyday life, which is, people in blue zones are just like us. They work and they worry, and they're stressed sometimes. So this, I think, saying some words, uh, uh, saying grace, or as the Okinawans, hara hachi bu, just slows them down a little bit.
Mhm.
So it's more likely that they'll feel fullness before they overeat. They tend to eat with their family. There's not a screen. They're not watching TV to their favorite show, as we often do. They eat off of smaller plates. And we know that when people eat off of smaller plates, they psychologically perceive more food and therefore eat less.
Mhm.
So there's all kinds of little tricks that we learn from blue zones about mindlessly consuming fewer calories, which is part of the battle here in America, where we're consuming 500 calories or so a day more than we should be, and that's really at the root of at a lot of the obesity problem in this country.
Mm-hmm.
What about environment? I mean, did any shared across the blue zones? I'm assuming cleaner air or local environment or something like that, or even maybe the government and public policies and stuff
Mhm.
like that. Do they share any values or any consistencies amongst blue zones?
Yeah, I would say in most blue zones they have better public health than we do. Trusted public health. Costa Rica, for example, every man, woman, and child has the right to one visit a year from a basic health team who will have your health records. They'll screen you for uh, diabetes, depression, high blood pressure. They'll walk through your house and look for standing water, which could be breeding places for mosquitoes. They'll look in your kitchen and look for signs of bad eating habits. And if they see a disease start to grow, budding heart problem or early stage diabetes or depression, they get to treat it right away.
Mm.
Rather than, as we do in this country, wait 15 years till it shows up in an emergency room as a, 3-alarm heart attack, and which, costs hundreds of thousands of dollars and can kill or maim you. Very good. Um, so they were good at eradicating infectious disease. The blue zones are often a sweet spot between a very traditional culture that endures to this day, but enough modern public health that they're not, dying of tuberculosis or malaria
Mhm.
or cholera, all these diseases that beleaguered these populations before, say, 1900.
Hmm. And so you've got the blue zones, but then you've also studied happiness. So you've got other books out. You've got Eating, the World's Healthiest People. But you're coming out right away with a new book. I think you said it was called the Blue Zone Challenge.
Yes. So the book you're displaying there, thank you for that, by
Uh-huh.
the way. Blue
Sure.
Zones really captures, it was the National Geographic project, which identifies the 5 blue zones and explains what these people do to live a long time. And I'll tell you, even though they do eat a whole food, plant-based diet, they put their family first, they have a strong sense of purpose, they have sacred daily rituals, they don't have any more discipline or individual responsibility or self-control than we do. Um,
That's actually
they're
good
not.
news,
Yeah, that's
right?
good news.
That's
Yeah.
good news, right?
It is great news,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
because they have an average set of genes and they're living 10 years longer. So if it's not because they have better behavior, what is it? And the answer is they have better environments. They live in places where the cheapest and most accessible and most delicious recipes are made from whole plant-based foods. Every time they go to work or a friend's house or out to eat, occasions a walk. They have gardens out back, so they're moving every 20 minutes or so mindlessly. They know their sense of purpose and they put their purpose to work, usually through philanthropic, sometimes for their own jobs. And they're constantly socializing in a healthy way. So my business for the past 12 years has been working with cities and insurance companies to take these blue zones insights and apply them at the population level to lower the obesity rate. And we get paid when we lower the obesity rate. But for this book, the Blue Zone Challenge, I've taken this now 20 years of research and I've distilled it into a book for individuals that they can use to we're not going to harangue them to change their behavior or yet another fad diet, but we are going to show them evidence-based ways to set up their home, their kitchen, their bedroom, their workplace, their social life, so that longevity ensues. So in other words, the healthy choice is the unconscious choice. And there's where the real opportunity is. Because as I point out, if you're overweight and unhealthy in America, it's probably not your fault. And the evidence I offer for that is 1980, most of us were alive. 15% of Americans were obese. Today, 46% of Americans are obese. Now, is that because Americans are worse people now than they were in 1980? No, it's because the number of fast food restaurants has gone up by a factor of 20. Over 50% of all retail outlets sell junk food, everything from where you get your diabetes medicine to where you get your oil change. We spend twice as much time in our cars. So the secret to longevity, to weight loss, to feeling better, to be biologically younger at every decade is not trying to change your mind or try to manipulate your behavior. It's the right idea, but it never lasts. The secret is taking these clear lessons from Blue Zones and shaping your surroundings so that the default is the healthy. And the idea behind the book, it's 4 weeks. We kind of gamify it, but we show you how to systematically go through your life and make some long-term changes that are going to favor longevity in the long run, for the long run.
I love that the healthy choice becomes the unconscious choice, right?
Mhm.
That's
Well,
to get to that point.
and I think when we're talking about longevity, also, we're not saying the goal is to live to 100 or forever or whatever here. I think there's also like life satisfaction, happiness, whatever we want to call it, but there's like a quality life component. I mean, that's the purpose of all of this, isn't it? Is really to help people understand that life doesn't have to suck as bad or at all. That there's, I mean, I guess you tell me what while you started on longevity, you've kind of gone into these other areas.
Yeah, so I wrote a cover story for National Geographic magazine on happiness, what data tells us about what really drives happiness. And I wrote the Blue Zones of Happiness book about that very topic. And it turns out that for the most part, the same things that get us to a healthy age 95 also make us happy along the way.
Right.
And there are things like a quality group of friends. Believe it or not, when you eat a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet, you feel better all day long. There's actually research. If you start your day with eggs and bacon and buttered toast, you're actually about 20% less happy during that day than if you eat something lighter like oatmeal or a plant-based breakfast. knowing your sense of purpose, both in longevity and happiness, are favored by knowing why you wake up in the morning. Living in walkable communities throughout the United States is a very high correlation between walk score and happiness. We enjoy bumping into other humans, believe it or not. We enjoy feeling the safety and the absence of motors and pollution, living in a walkable community. And it turns out that in blue zones, they're walking all the time. So there's so much remarkable crossover between the two.
And I think, and I'd heard you mention in another interview something about you can actually go out now and find places that are the happiest places to live. But is it really just is there some website or some resource where is it just the walkable places in the United States, or is there some other resource for that?
So you can Google Gallup Well-Being Index, WBI, and it's actually Nobel Prize level research that has actually surveyed more than 3 million Americans in the past 10 years. And it can tell you exactly the happiest parts of America. And they are Boulder, Colorado, San Luis Obispo, Provo, Utah, oddly enough, Naples, Florida. And of all the things that you might try to make you happier, statistically speaking, the most powerful thing you can do is move. Move to a happier place.
Yeah, I heard you actually say that on that, and you had talked. You were referencing the talk I was watching. You were referencing actually refugees that were moving from Africa into Canada. I think is what I remember, if I remember right.
And people from Soviet bloc countries to Denmark. So think about this for a minute. So these are people who move. They don't do positive psychology courses. They don't change their sex. They don't change their age. They don't change their education level. They don't change their religion. They usually don't change their marital status or the number of children they have or their values. All they do is move. And within 1 year, they report the happiness level of their adoptive home, which in many cases represents a doubling of their happiness. There is nothing else you can do to double your happiness. Nothing, especially in a sustained way, which just adds to my argument that if you want to live longer or be happier, don't try to change your mind, shape your surroundings. And now we have plenty of data and plenty of evidence to show you the exact things you can do to stack the deck in your favor for a longer and better life. And most of those are in the Blue Zone Challenge.
Blue Zone Challenge. Is there a place though? So as I was hearing you say that, I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't know where I'm at on the happiness scale. So is there a place that you have that you like people go and test their happiness level based on other people?
So we worked with University of Pennsylvania. If you go to bluezones.com and click on the True Happiness Test, it's free. It'll take you about 5 minutes. And so happiness, academically speaking, is a meaningless term because you can't measure it.
Right.
But you were using some of the right terminology before. You can measure life satisfaction, which is how satisfied people are with their life. You can measure positive and negative affect, which is how you're experiencing life. And the questions that are asked for measuring that have to do with how often you experience worry and stress and anger and lack thereof. And then there's a question about purpose. Are you able to use your strengths to do what you do best every day? That's the academic question for purpose. And the True Happiness tests are going to ask you those questions, but then they're going to ask you 30 or 40 other questions about what you're doing with your life. And the algorithm tells you exactly what you could be doing to improve happiness in both of those areas, all three of those areas.
For me, I'm pretty sure it's drink more. I have not been drinking enough. So I'm gonna.
Well, that red wine.
I haven't been drinking enough red wine. That was my point. When I was good at drinking, it wasn't red wine, and so I don't think it really added happiness to my life.
Do we know what the red zones are? Do you have what blue zones? Does that mean we know what red zones are? Like could I look up and go, oh man, I live in the red zone?
Well, the unhealthy, I mean, the places with the lowest life expectancy in America are in places like Kentucky and West Virginia. These junk food oceans, and people drive everywhere. The life expectancy in Boulder, Colorado is about 20 years greater than it is in Kentucky.
Oh my God.
And it's
20
not
years?
because people in Boulder are somehow better people. They just live in a place where it's easier to get places on foot or on bike, and they have very good access to plant-based food instead of ultra processed foods and the junk food that are just allowed to proliferate wildly in these other parts of America.
I know, I fly professionally for major airline, and we were talking with another pilots. We were talking about that, and we were kind of sitting there waiting for our chance to get on the plane, and we're watching everybody get off, and 8 wheelchairs were there, and it wasn't because this was 90-year-old. This was a 45-year-old obese person, I mean, and I was talking to the captain about that, and he's like, yeah, 30 years ago, we didn't have one wheelchair, and now you've got 8 getting off on the 737, and you're just like, it's crazy. And then I was thinking about, someone showed me a picture of like Coney Island, 1969, 4th of July weekend, and everybody on the beach.
Right.
And nobody's overweight.
Huh.
And now it's, I think it's just all
That's
that.
the norm,
It's all that. It's all the junk food, all the processed corn syrup type stuff.
Well, and actually, from my own research, I read on the CDC website, it's actually 69 to 71% of people are overweight or obese. So it's not just obese. It's obviously 20 pounds overweight's not great for you either.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Right.
But being underweight can be bad for you too. But you guys have. I'm really good at answering questions on Instagram. So if your audience has more questions after the podcast, if they just direct message me at Dan Buettner, I will answer all their questions. And
That's amazing.
I know we only
Thank
had 45 minutes here, but I appreciated the opportunity to catch up with you guys and meet your audience and meet you guys. I wish we could do it in person.
Sure, yes.
And I appreciate the kind words you said about Blue Zones Challenge.
No, definitely.
And when does Blue Zone Challenge come out? Just what's the exact date so people can find it?
Comes out Tuesday, December 7th.
December 7th. Okay. All right. So by the time this airs, this will be available.
Amazon's probably the best way, and there'll be a big there'll be a piece on the Today Show on the 9th. So if you want to see it kind of with the work, you can tune into NBC wherever you live
very good
and see it.
All right, so
of course, the best place to learn about the Blue Zone Challenge is on this very podcast.
Yes.
Okay. So you mentioned the website, bluezones.com. We got the book. Anything else, Dan, that people can, and Instagram. Anything else that people can connect with you?
Instagram is at Dan Buettner. That's the best one. And I have a website at danbuettner.com, but Instagram seems to be the best way to communicate with people these days.
Okay.
Well, excellent. Right. Well, Dan, thanks so much for coming on the show. This has just been so much fun.
Fascinating.
We hope to stay in touch with you, but thanks so much for coming on the show.
Anytime. My pleasure, and thank you for being such great hosts.
Yes.